Right, earlier we looked at the water shortages in some parts, water outages across Tshwane and Johannesburg affecting tens of thousands of residents over the recent days. At least we are hearing that water supply is returning to those three hospitals severely impacted. While rolling blackouts continue, water systems in Gauteng and other parts of the country have come under severe strain. Let's discuss. We're joined by the Director General of Water and Sanitation. That's Dr. Sean Phillips. Thank you for being with us, Director General. The President spoke yesterday about the fact that if we don't deal with the power crisis, then other things will be affected, like water infrastructure. And I was thinking, listening to that, it feels like that infrastructure is already crumbling. Perhaps that's hastened by load shedding. How bad is the national situation in your mind?
It varies from place to place in the country. In some areas of the country, like in Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, there are water shortages because there's a terrible drought in that area. In Gauteng, in Johannesburg and Pretoria, the reason why there's been shortages of water in some areas is not because of a drought. We don't have a drought in Gauteng, the dams are full. But there's been several reasons why Gauteng has been struggling with water supply, the Joburg and Tshwane municipalities in particular. The first is, as you correctly say, load shedding has an effect on the ability of Rand Water, which supplies treated water to Joburg Water and to Tshwane. Load shedding affects the ability of Rand Water to pump water to Tshwane and to Joburg, and it also affects the ability of Joburg Water and Tshwane to pump water within their distribution systems. Then load shedding also causes damage to electrical mechanical equipment, repeated load shedding, switching on and off the electricity. And then in addition, in Gauteng in recent weeks, we've had a series of heat waves. And during those heat waves, people who do have access to water use more water. They're putting a lot more water on their gardens to prevent their plants from drying during these heat waves. And there's a big spike in demand, and these factors all working together result in it being very difficult for Joburg Water and Tshwane to fill their reservoirs. Now, when that happens, it means that the people in high-lying areas, because water flows from the reservoirs to various areas through gravity, so the high-lying areas, when the water is not sufficiently full in the reservoirs, there isn't enough gravity to pump water to the high-lying areas, and then people in high-lying areas have a shortage of water while there's still water being supplied to low-lying areas because there's sufficient gravity to push the water from the reservoirs to the low-lying areas.
And like you've pointed out, I mean, thank you for that explanation. There are different players involved, and I can tell you, being in news in Johannesburg, sometimes it's hard to figure out what's going on because Rand Water is the bulk supplier. They will have an issue that City Power has to then go and fix. Joburg Water is then stuck, and the different players point to each other all the time. So that is a little bit frustrating. But if we start with piece one, from the dams to the reservoirs, Rand Water, the bulk supplier, is there no work around the load shedding? Is there no solar technology? I don't know. Is there technology out there that has been considered to keep the pumps going?
Yes, there is. Firstly, let me just address your point about it being difficult to understand with all these institutions. That is correct. There are various institutions. It can be difficult to understand. But what I'd like to say is that as the department, together with the minister, we have been meeting with all the different institutions. And if you read the press statements by Joburg Water and Rand Water carefully, they're working very closely together. And they're not really pointing fingers at each other. Sometimes there might be a breakdown in Rand Water pumping equipment because of the load shedding, for example, and sometimes it might be in Joburg equipment. But there is consensus amongst all of us as to what are the causes of the problems and what needs to be done about it. In that regard, both Rand Water and Joburg Water are in the early stages of putting in plans to have alternative sources of power. just like many other industries are in the country and municipalities in generally in the early stages of developing alternative sources of power. So both Joburg and Rand Water have already started to procure things like generators so that they can keep some of the pumping equipment going during periods of load shedding. And they're also looking at other options such as solar power and batteries to do it. But it's not something that can be done overnight. But they are in the process of doing those investments so they are not so reliant on Eskom supply, and they're able to manage these periods of heavy load shedding better.
Can we also address the perception that this is something else, again, infrastructure that has not been maintained and it's gotten out of hand? Let's focus on KwaZulu-Natal, for example. Umgeni Water reportedly could not go into detail about irregular expenditure, 150 million rand, historic irregular expenditure, close to 2 billion. Forensic investigations are underway. But your opinion, I mean, how much of the sewage running into the sea, the water problems, is due to past mismanagement as opposed to floods and other more recent things?
Again, it depends on various areas of the country. In Gauteng, Joburg Water in particular is one of the better run municipal water entities, and Rand Water is one of our better run water boards. So the condition of the infrastructure of Rand Water's infrastructure and Joburg Water's infrastructure is better than most other areas of the country. So while they do need to do more maintenance on it, the situation is not such that in Joburg and Rand Water that the key problem is that the infrastructure is completely dilapidated and the load shedding is just pushing it over the edge. It's different in Joburg and with Rand Water. But in eThekwini, the infrastructure has been less well maintained over time. It is in a relatively poor condition. And the floods that happened had a severe effect, caused a lot of damage to the infrastructure in eThekwini. So in eThekwini, it's a combination of neglect of maintenance of the water and sanitation infrastructure and the devastating effects on the floods, which has resulted in the extent of sewage leakages in that area. We are, again, working closely with COGTA and with eThekwini and supporting eThekwini. We've seconded engineers to eThekwini. We're assisting them with their plans. There is a lot of work going on to repair the sewage leaks and to make the beaches safe again. But in the longer term, the city is going to have to prioritize better in future, carrying out maintenance on all its water and sanitation infrastructure so that it's better able to withstand the kind of floods that occurred about a year ago now.
All right, Director General, we appreciate your time. I hope we can chat again. I wanted to talk to you about sort of general trust in the quality of water coming out of our taps as well, if we can look at some sort of system, but hopefully we'll chat again. We've run out of time. That was the DG of Water and Sanitation, Dr. Sean Phillips.